The lipstick wasn't mine, and yet, somehow, it broke me. That's how it began. A pale pink smear on the collar of Daniel's white dress shirt, faint, almost delicate, but loud enough to shatter something inside me. He had left early that morning, like always. Coffee still steaming, toast untouched. But the shirt, it was hanging from the back of the chair by our bed when I found it. I remember holding it between my fingers. The fabric still smelled faintly of his cologne, that woody, citrus blend I'd chosen for him on our 3rd anniversary. But beneath that was another scent, soft, powdery, unfamiliar. Lipstick. It wasn't the color I used. I've worn the same shade for years, muted rose, subtle. This one was lighter, playful, someone else's. For a moment, my breath stopped. Then my mind began spinning, replaying the late nights, the sudden work trips, the way he avoided eye contact lately when I asked how his day had been. Daniel, my husband of 12 years. My safe place. My study man. And now, a stranger's lipstick on his shirt. That night, I made dinner like nothing had happened. Chicken stew, his favorite. He walked in around 8, exhausted, loosening his tie before even closing the door. Long day? I asked, trying to sound normal. Yeah, he sighed. Meetings ran late. His eyes didn't meet mine. We ate mostly in silence. The clinking of spoons against bowls filled the space between us like small, polite lies. I studied him, the crease between his brows, the way his hands shook slightly when he lifted the spoon. He'd always been calm, unshakable. Now, something was off. When he excused himself early and headed to bed, I stayed behind, staring at his empty chair. The lipstick stain felt like it was glowing in the corner of my mind. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh he made in his sleep felt heavy, like truth pressing against my chest. By morning, I'd decided to wait, to watch. Because if there was another woman, I needed to know who and why. Before all this, our marriage was quiet, predictable. Maybe that was part of the problem. Daniel worked as a financial analyst, often buried in spreadsheets or calls. I ran a small flower shop downtown, Petal and Pine. It was my sanctuary, filled with the smell of lilies and soil, the hum of soft jazz, and the rhythm of my scissors snipping stems. He'd visit sometimes, bring me lunch, or just sit on the stool near the counter, flipping through his phone while I worked. Those were my favorite days, simple, unremarkable, yet full. We weren't perfect. No couple is. We argued about bills, about how little time he spent with me, about my tendency to stay late at the shop. But at the end of every fight, he'd pull me close, whisper, "We're okay, right?" And I'd nod. Because we always were. Or so I thought. The lipstick changed everything. Over the next few days, I began to notice small things. His phone, once left casually on the counter, now never left his pocket. His clothes smelled faintly different, like a mix of perfume and antiseptic. His texts became short. And when I reached for his hand at night, he'd flinch just slightly. I started telling myself stories. That he'd met someone younger, freer. Someone who didn't smell like soil and roses. Someone who still laughed loudly, who didn't talk about invoices or dinner plans. The thought made my chest ache. But even in my suspicion, there was love. That's the cruel thing about love, it doesn't disappear when doubt creeps in. It just hurts more. On the 4th night, I followed him. He said he was going to meet a client for dinner, but I knew that restaurant, the one he mentioned, closed at 6 on weekdays. So when he kissed my cheek and left, I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys. The evening air was cool, the kind that made streetlights shimmer like distant stars. I parked a block away and watched him walk down the narrow lane beside the old hospital. He didn't enter any restaurant. Instead, he disappeared through a side door of a small hospice building I didn't even know existed there. For an hour, I waited in the car, my heart pounding against the steering wheel. Then he came out, not alone. He was helping a woman into a wheelchair, tucking a blanket around her knees with a tenderness that stopped me cold. Her head was covered with a scarf. Her body frail. They spoke quietly, and I saw him smile. That soft, broken kind of smile he used when he was trying not to cry. Then he wheeled her back inside. I didn't follow. I couldn't. Because in that moment, The lipstick didn't matter anymore. The question changed from who is she to what's happening to her. And somewhere deep down, I already feared the answer. That night, when he returned home, I was waiting in the dark living room. "How was your meeting?" I asked quietly. He froze. Just a flicker, barely noticeable, but enough. "It was fine," he said. I didn't respond, just stared at him. The silence stretched until he sighed, rubbing his face. "Can we not do this tonight, please?" he murmured. Something in his voice cracked, not guilt, but exhaustion. And that's when I realized, whatever he was hiding, it wasn't betrayal. It was pain. Still, I wasn't ready to forgive what I didn't understand. So I nodded, and he walked past me, unaware that the next day, I'd go back to that hospice alone. The hospice looked even smaller in daylight. A narrow, beige building with a rusted sign that read St. Catherine's Palliative Care Home. The garden out front was filled with marigolds and overgrown grass. I parked across the street and waited. People came and went, nurses, a few visitors, but not Daniel. My heart pounded with every passing car, every shifting shadow. Finally, I gathered my courage and went inside. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender, the kind of smell that clings to you. A soft hum of machines and quiet whispers filled the hallway. Behind the reception desk sat an elderly woman with kind eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yes. I'm looking for someone. A patient, I think." Her name might be, I swallowed, realizing I didn't even know. "I saw my husband here last night. Daniel Moore." The woman smiled gently. "Oh, Daniel. Yes, he comes here every evening. He's a good man." My throat tightened. Who is he visiting?" She glanced at the patient log, then back at me. "His sister." My world stopped for a second. "Sister?" I echoed. "No, that can't be right. Daniel's an only child." The woman frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, dear, but I see him here almost daily. He takes care of her himself. Brings food, reads to her. He's very devoted." The air around me felt heavy, like it was closing in. "What's her name?" I asked, my voice trembling. The woman flipped through the book again. "Rachel. Rachel Moore. Rachel." The name echoed inside me, faint but familiar, like a whisper from a past conversation I never paid attention to. "Can I see her?" I asked, almost pleading. "I'm afraid visits are limited to immediate family," she said softly. I nodded numbly, thanked her, and walked out. Outside, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at nothing. Rachel Moore. Sister. But Daniel never mentioned her. Not once. That night, I confronted him. He was in the kitchen washing dishes, a rare thing for him to do, sleeves rolled up, water dripping from his hands. "Daniel," I said quietly. He turned, startled. "Hey, you scared me." I took a deep breath. "Who's Rachel?" The plate in his hand slipped and shattered in the sink. For a second, neither of us spoke. Only the sound of water running and glass cracking under the tap. Then he whispered, "Where did you hear that name?" "I went to St. Catherine's." His shoulders dropped, the fight leaving his body before it began. He leaned against the counter, eyes closed. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he murmured. I folded my arms. "You mean you didn't want me to find out at all?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he only did when he was scared. "Please, just let me explain. I've been finding lipstick on your shirts, Daniel. You disappear for hours. You lie to me. And now, there's suddenly a sister I've never heard of." He looked up at me then, eyes wet. "She's dying, Emily." The room fell silent. He took a step closer. "Rachel, she's my half-sister. My father had another family before he met my mom. I didn't even know she existed until 2 months ago. She reached out, said she had cancer. End stage. She didn't want to die alone." I stood frozen, the anger draining out of me, replaced by confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because I didn't know how," he said. "Because you've always hated secrets, and this one wasn't simple. Rachel didn't want anyone to know. Not even her own husband. She said if people found out, her son would lose custody after she's gone." I stared at him, trying to process everything. "So you've been taking care of her? All this time?" He nodded. Every night. She's been getting weaker. Some nights, she doesn't even recognize me. I do her laundry there. That's how the lipstick got on my shirt. She wanted to feel normal, she said. She asked me to bring her favorite lipstick, the one her mother used to wear. I helped her put it on. I pressed a hand to my mouth. The image of him helping a dying woman, his sister, smearing soft pink on her lips before she lost the strength to smile, hit me like a wave. I sat down, my legs trembling. You should have told me, I said again, softer this time. He knelt beside me. I know. I just wanted to protect you from the weight of it. You've been through so much already, your mother's death, the shop, everything. I didn't want to add to it. For the first time in weeks, I saw the man I married, tired, flawed, human, but full of quiet love. And yet, something inside me still hurt. Not because he lied, but because he didn't trust me to carry the truth with him. We sat there for a long time. No shouting. No tears. Just silence thick with everything we didn't know how to say. When he finally went to bed, I stayed behind. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the stillness. In 12 years of marriage, I thought I knew every corner of Daniel's heart. But now I realized sometimes, love isn't about knowing everything. It's about standing beside someone even when you don't. The next morning, I made a decision. If he wouldn't let me into this part of his life, I would walk into it myself. Not out of suspicion anymore, but out of love. Because whatever burden he was carrying, it didn't belong to him alone. 2 days later, I went back to St. Catherine's. This time, I brought lilies, white ones. Rachel's room was at the end of the hall, sunlight spilling across her bed. When I stepped inside, she looked up weakly. Her eyes, the same hazel as Daniel's, softened. You must be Emily, she whispered. I froze. You know me? She smiled faintly. He talks about you all the time. And just like that, the walls between truth and fear began to crumble. Rachel's room was small but warm. A vase of half-wilted daisies sat on the bedside table, and a photograph of a little boy was tucked into the corner of the mirror, a boy with a crooked smile and bright eyes. She looked fragile, her skin pale, her frame almost lost beneath the thin blanket. But when she spoke, her voice carried a strange strength. I was wondering when you'd come, she said. I stepped closer, clutching the lilies. I didn't know you existed until 2 days ago. She chuckled softly. Daniel was never good at talking about pain. He thinks silence protects people. That line hit me like truth wrapped in kindness. I placed the flowers in the vase, replacing the daisies. He loves you, I said quietly. You can see it. Rachel smiled, her eyes glassy. He's always loved too much. Even as a kid. He'd bring home stray cats, crying over every hurt thing. That's how he found me, I suppose, another lost thing. I sat down beside her, unsure what to say. I didn't mean to make trouble between you, she continued. He just wanted to keep his promise. Promise? I asked. She nodded. To our father. When he died, he made Daniel promise to look after me if I ever needed him. I think your husband carries that like a chain and a blessing both. There was something in her tone weary, tender, like she'd already accepted the end. She turned her head toward the window. I wasn't supposed to live this long, you know. The doctors said months. It's been almost a year. Silence filled the room. Outside, a bird chirped on the windowsill, its song too bright for a place like this. I don't want to die here, she whispered. But Daniel can't take me home. His wife would never forgive him. I felt my throat tighten. That's not true. Her eyes met mine, tired, searching. Isn't it? For a second, I had no answer. Because a week ago, I would have thought she was right. When I left the hospice that afternoon, my heart felt heavier but clearer. There was no other woman. There was no affair. There was only a secret buried under guilt, love, and fear. But even after learning the truth, I couldn't shake the ache. The ache of being left out of his struggle. The ache of not being trusted to stand beside him. That night, when Daniel came home, I was waiting again, not to accuse, but to understand. He looked at me cautiously, as if expecting another confrontation. I saw her, I said quietly. He froze. I brought her lilies. He exhaled, a mix of relief and dread washing over his face. You shouldn't have gone without telling me." "I needed to," I said. "I needed to see what you've been hiding from me." He sank into a chair, his eyes closing. "I didn't want you to pity her. Or me." "I don't," I said softly. "But I do wish you'd let me share it. She's your sister, Daniel. She could have been mine, too, if you'd let her." He rubbed his forehead. "I didn't know how. When she called, she sounded desperate. She didn't want to be a burden. I promised her I'd come quietly, that no one had to know. I thought I was protecting everyone." I sat beside him. "And instead, you hurt us both." He looked at me then, really looked the way he used to, before all the secrets. "You're right," he whispered. I did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, almost instinctively, I reached for his hand. His fingers were cold, trembling. He held on tightly, like a man afraid to lose his anchor. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Daniel still visited Rachel every evening, but now I went with him. We'd bring her meals from home, her favorite, mashed potatoes with too much butter, and peach tea that she said reminded her of summer. Sometimes, she'd make jokes about the nurses or ask about my shop. Other days, she'd just stare out the window and talk about her son. "He doesn't know how sick I am," she told me once. I told him Mommy's just tired. He's 9. I don't want him to remember me like this. The words broke something inside me. I squeezed her hand, my eyes burning. "He'll remember that you loved him. That's what matters." She smiled faintly. "Maybe." There was one evening, I'll never forget it, when she asked Daniel to dance. There was no music, just the faint hum of machines. He looked embarrassed at first, then gently took her hands. She stood, shaky but determined, and rested her head against his shoulder. I watched from the chair, my chest tight. That was love, I realized, not the easy kind, not the beautiful kind you see in movies. The real kind. The kind that shows up in hospitals, that holds trembling hands, that stays even when it hurts. A week later, Rachel's condition worsened. The calls came at dawn, her breathing had changed, the nurses said. When we arrived, she was pale and quiet, eyes half closed. Daniel sat by her side, reading from a worn book of poetry. "And when I go, let it be softly, with laughter somewhere behind the door," he read. His voice cracked on the last line. Rachel's lips moved. I leaned closer. "Tell her, thank you," she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. And just like that, she was gone. The monitor beeped once, then fell silent. Daniel pressed his forehead to her hand, and I rested mine on his back, feeling his body shake with quiet sobs. It wasn't the kind of grief that breaks, it was the kind that empties. Quiet, slow, permanent. The days after the funeral were gray and still. Daniel barely spoke. He went through the motions, eating, sleeping, breathing, but his eyes looked hollow. I wanted to fix it, to take away the weight he carried. But grief isn't something you fix. It's something you hold until it softens. So I held him. Every night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, I'd place my hand on his chest, feeling the faint rise and fall of his breath. We didn't say much. We didn't need to, because sometimes love sounds like silence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he whispered, "Thank you for finding me in the dark, Emily." I smiled through tears. "Next time, don't make me look so hard." He laughed, just a small, broken sound. But it was the first laughter I'd heard from him in months. And in that moment, I knew even though we couldn't change what had happened, we were still standing. Together. Grief is a quiet thing. It doesn't arrive screaming or leave neatly folded. It lingers in coffee cups, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the space on the bed where someone used to breathe. After Rachel's funeral, Daniel went back to work too soon. That's how he handled pain, by keeping busy, by pretending the world hadn't shifted under his feet. But I could see it in small ways. The way he'd pause before locking the front door, as if waiting for someone to call him back. The way he'd open the window at night, just to breathe in. Air that wasn't heavy with silence. I didn't push him. Sometimes love means giving someone space to fall apart safely. But I made sure he never fell alone. A month later, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded letter Rachel's handwriting. For Emily, it said on the front. My heart stopped. I read it alone in the kitchen, the morning light slanting across the table. Emily, if you're reading this, it means Daniel finally let someone share his burdens. Thank you for being that person. He always talked about your strength, the way you could make a home feel alive just by being in it. I know he's hard to love sometimes. He builds walls to protect people, but those walls also keep him lonely. Please don't mistake his silence for distance. It's just his way of holding the world together when it starts to crumble. Take care of him for me. Tell him I forgive him for keeping me a secret and that I never meant to come between you two. With love, Rachel. I folded the letter slowly, tears dropping onto the paper. She didn't owe me forgiveness. Yet, somehow, she gave it anyway. That night, I placed the letter on Daniel's pillow. When he found it, he didn't say a word. He just sat there for a long time, reading it over and over, his hand covering his mouth. Then he turned to me and said softly, she always understood more than I did. I nodded, my throat tight. Maybe that's why she trusted you to finish what she started. He looked at me confused. She wanted her son to remember love, not loss, I said. Maybe that's something we can help with. The next weekend, we met Ethan, Rachel's son. He was small for 9, with messy hair and cautious eyes that watched everything. His aunt had been caring for him, a kind woman named Marla who greeted us at the door of a modest apartment. Ethan clung to her leg at first. When Daniel knelt down and smiled, the boy tilted his head, studying him. You look like my mom, he said quietly. Daniel's eyes glistened. She was my sister, he replied. She wanted me to make sure you're okay. The boy nodded solemnly, as if understanding something bigger than himself. That day, we took him to the park. He didn't talk much at first, just kicked at the gravel and watched other kids play. But when Daniel helped him fly a kite, a bright blue one with yellow tails, he laughed. A loud, joyful, reckless laugh that made everything around us feel lighter. I remember looking up at that kite as it soared higher into the sky and thinking this was what Rachel had wanted. Not pity, not sadness, just a moment of freedom. Over time, Ethan became part of our weekends. Sometimes Daniel would pick him up for breakfast, or we'd spend afternoons at the flower shop where he liked to help me water the plants. Once, he found an old photograph of Rachel and Daniel as kids, the only one they ever took together. It was taken just a few months before their father died. Ethan stared at it for a long time, then whispered, I think she'd be happy you have me now. I smiled and touched his shoulder. I think so too. But healing isn't a straight path. Some nights, Daniel still woke up crying. Sometimes, I'd find him sitting outside on the porch long after midnight, staring at nothing. At first, I'd try to comfort him, talk, distract, reason. But grief doesn't always want words. It wants presence. So I learned to just sit beside him, our hands brushing, silence saying everything that needed to be said. One night, as the rain fell in slow, rhythmic taps, he whispered, I don't know how to move on. I looked at him, the man I had once suspected of betrayal, the man who had been breaking quietly beside me. You don't have to move on, I said. You just have to keep moving. He nodded, tears glistening in the porch light. You make it sound simple. It's not, I smiled softly. But it's enough. Months turned into a year. Life didn't return to what it was before, it became something else entirely. Quieter, softer, wiser. Daniel started volunteering at the hospice twice a week. They're short on hands, he said, but I knew it was more than that. It was his way of staying close to her and of finding forgiveness for himself. I, too, began to change. My flower shop grew into something more, not just a business, but a place where people came to heal. I started a small project called Petals for Grace, delivering flowers to patients at local hospitals. It felt right, as if Rachel's spirit had planted that seed. And Ethan, he became part of our story. We didn't try to replace what he'd lost. We just made room for it. Some weekends, he'd fall asleep on our couch after watching cartoons, his head resting on Daniel's arm. Every time I saw that, the two of them side by side, I felt something settle inside me. Peace, maybe. Or purpose. There's one moment I keep coming back to. It was a quiet Sunday morning. The house smelled like pancakes and sunlight. Ethan was coloring at the kitchen table, Daniel humming softly as he flipped the next batch. I leaned against the counter, watching them. For the first time in a long time, there was no shadow between us. Daniel looked over his shoulder, smiled, and said, "You know, I still can't believe you stayed." I smiled back. "That makes two of us." He set the spatula down and walked over, wrapping his arms around me. "You saved me," he whispered. "No," I said, resting my head on his chest. "We saved each other." In the months that followed, I found the lipstick again, the same pale pink, tucked in the back of Daniel's drawer. I held it for a long time, turning it between my fingers. Then, instead of throwing it away, I placed it in a small glass jar beside a pressed lily. Because it wasn't a symbol of betrayal anymore. It was a reminder that love, no matter how bruised, can still heal what's been broken. Grief changes the way people see you. In the weeks following Rachel's death, everyone treated Daniel with that quiet, cautious kindness reserved for the bereaved, the kind that says we're sorry, but never we understand. At work, his colleagues gave him space. At church, people spoke to me in hushed tones. They'd nod solemnly, some squeezing my hand as if tragedy were contagious. But the truth was Daniel didn't need pity. He needed purpose. And slowly, he began to find it. St. Catherine's Hospice invited him to speak at a small fundraiser for new patient rooms. I remember the night vividly, the room filled with candles, the air carrying that strange mixture of sadness and hope that seems to live in every hospice hallway. Daniel stood at the front, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the microphone. He wasn't a public speaker. He'd never been one for attention. But when he spoke, his voice was calm, grounded. "I came to this place first as a stranger," he began. "I thought I was just doing my duty, keeping a promise. But what I found here was love that doesn't end when life does. My sister taught me that." He paused, his eyes glistening under the soft lights. "We spend so much time trying to protect the people we love from pain. But maybe love isn't about protection. Maybe it's about presence, staying, even when it hurts." There was silence when he finished. Then, one by one, people began to clap. It wasn't loud or rushed, it was gentle, like gratitude made into sound. I stood at the back, tears streaming down my face. That night, for the first time, Daniel's grief became something bigger than pain. It became purpose. The fundraiser was a success. Enough donations came in to add 2 new rooms, one of which Daniel personally helped design. He insisted on small details, large windows facing the garden, lavender plants on the sill, soft lighting. "So people can see the sky," he said. Even at the end. He didn't tell anyone that he'd modeled it after Rachel's room. But I knew. Around that same time, Petal and Pine also started changing. I noticed people didn't just come in for flowers anymore. They came to talk, to share stories, to cry. A woman named Nora visited every Friday, always buying white daisies. One afternoon, she told me they were my mother's favorite. She passed last year, but I feel close to her when I take these home. I smiled and told her something I'd learned the hard way. Sometimes flowers say what words can't. She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "Then I think your shop speaks for a lot of us." I started keeping a journal behind the counter, a memory book. People could write a name, a thought, a memory of someone they loved. Within weeks, it was filled with messages, messy, raw, beautiful. For Dad, who taught me to plant seeds. For Lily, who made the best soup in the world. For Rachel, even though I never met you, thank you for reminding me to love harder. When I read that last one, I had to sit down. Because somewhere out there, someone had heard Daniel's speech. And Rachel's story had already begun healing strangers. One evening, about a year later, we were closing up the shop when Ethan came running in, clutching a school project. "Look," he said, proudly holding up a poster board. "It's about heroes." The paper was covered in photos and hand-drawn flowers. In the center was a picture of Daniel, smiling beside the hospice garden. Underneath, in a child's uneven handwriting, were the words, "My Uncle Daniel teaches people that love never stops." Daniel stared at it for a long time, then laughed, that deep, quiet laugh I hadn't heard since before all of it. Heroes, huh, he said, ruffling Ethan's hair. Ethan grinned. You don't wear a cape, but you help people feel less sad. That's better. I don't think I've ever seen Daniel prouder. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, Daniel and I sat on the porch again. The sky was clear, the air cool and still. He looked at me and said, "You know, sometimes I think Rachel's still here." I smiled. "I think she is. Just not in the way we expect." He nodded. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" "The lipstick?" I said, half smiling. He chuckled. "Yeah, feels like another lifetime." I leaned against his shoulder. It was the beginning of everything, really. The hurt, the truth, the healing. If not for that stain, we might never have found her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he whispered, "It's strange how love can hide inside pain." I squeezed his hand. Maybe it doesn't hide. Maybe we just learned to see it differently. As time passed, the ache became softer. Rachel's memory stopped being a wound and became a whisper, one that lived in everything we built after her. The hospice garden bloomed brighter every spring. Ethan grew taller, braver, funnier. Daniel smiled more. And I learned that forgiveness isn't one moment. It's 1,000 small choices, every day you choose to understand instead of accuse. There's one moment I'll never forget. A woman came into the shop one afternoon, young, nervous, holding a crumpled note. "Hi," she said. "I'm looking for something, forgiving. My husband and we've been fighting and I want to make it right." I thought for a moment, then handed her a small bouquet of pale pink roses. "They're delicate," I said. "They bruise easily, but they always open again if you give them time." She smiled, a little uncertain. "Thank you. That's perfect." After she left, I stood there for a while, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. That's when I realized I wasn't just selling flowers anymore. I was sharing what Rachel had taught all of us, that love, when it's real, survives misunderstanding. It grows back stronger. A few months later, Daniel surprised me with something. He'd taken one of the hospice photographs, the garden in full bloom, and framed it. Beneath it, in Rachel's handwriting from an old note, he'd added the words, "Love doesn't end. It changes form." He hung it on the wall above our bed. Every morning, sunlight catches the frame and casts soft reflections across the room, like tiny reminders of everything we lost and everything we found. Now, sometimes when I close the shop late at night, I find myself whispering thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to the life that unfolded the way it did. Because if you'd told me that the lipstick I once mistook for betrayal would lead to all this, to forgiveness, to purpose, to new family, I wouldn't have believed you. But it did. And I think that's what love really is, not perfect, not painless, but patient. Always patient. The night Rachel died, I thought her story had ended. Now I know it only began through us, through Ethan, through every person who finds beauty again after breaking. That's the legacy she left behind. It's been 3 years since that morning, the one when I found the lipstick on Daniel's shirt. Sometimes, when I think back to that moment, I almost don't recognize the woman I was then. The one who jumped to conclusions, who mistook silence for secrets, who believed love could only survive truth when spoken, not when carried quietly. But life has a way of humbling you, of showing you that sometimes love hides in the places you least expect it. The hospice garden still blooms every spring. Daniel and I visit often. Ethan, too. He's 12 now, taller, louder, full of life. He always runs straight to Rachel's bench, the one beneath the willow tree, and leaves a single lily there. "For Mom," he says. Daniel and I just smile. There's no sadness in it anymore, just warmth. I've learned that forgiveness isn't something you give once, it's something you live. Every day that you choose understanding over pride, softness over anger, faith over fear, you forgive a little more. And maybe that's what marriage really is, not just a promise to love, but a promise to keep loving, even when you're hurting, even when you're wrong, even when you don't know the full story. Because sometimes, love's truest test isn't in the grand gestures. It's in the quiet ones. The ones that happen when no one's watching, when you choose to stay. So if you ever find yourself standing where I once stood, confused, broken, Holding a shirt that smells like someone else's perfume. Take a breath. Ask yourself not just what you see, but what you might not yet understand. Because not every secret means betrayal, and not every silence hides deceit. Sometimes it hides devotion. That's my story. And now I want to ask you, if you were in my place that day, would you have walked away or waited to understand? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched you, please subscribe, because sometimes all we need is one reminder that love, in all its messy forms, can still be beautiful.